Hello, and welcome to ADC Sports coverage of the girls basketball sectional tournaments. My name is Sam Frick. I'm the founder and editor at Around the Northeast Corner, covering 30 schools across Northeast Indiana and parts of Elkhart County. And so we're going to look at some of these sectionals outside of our area, barely outside of our area, I should say, but also looking into our area sectionals here in Class 2A. We begin with a sectional that's just outside of our coverage, and that's 2A Sectional 40. This is hosted by Alexandria, the hosts who they are considered to be the favorites to win this sectional, which they have not won a sectional championship since the year 2002. And they got a player in Jacqueline Hosier who is a 2,000 point scorer for this Alexandria ball club. The Tigers of Alexandria representing the Central Indiana Conference. They just won the CIC this season, averaging 26.2 points per game is Jacqueline Hosier. She is scoring over 2,000 points in her career, 2,030 to be exact. But this season, she's shooting 53% from the floor. That is a career high for her. Shooting 37% from three, also a career high. 84% from the free throw line. That's also a career high. 7 rebounds, career high. 7.5 steals per game. That's something we don't talk enough about is her defense. That's a career high as well. 5.8 assists per game. So Jacqueline Hosier can do everything but the kitchen sink for the Alexandria Tigers. And she is going to be a player that really dictates how far Alexandria can go in the playoffs. Beyond her, you really goes down to Lily Harp, who's at 9.5 points per game. And then Riley Kellums is at 7.4 points. So really, when it's all said and done, kind of like Lake Report, what? So really, when you look at Alexandria, their road to success in the state tournament really hinges on the play of Jacqueline Hosier. When she's on, this team is very, very good. When she's struggling, Alexandria is definitely beatable. And I think that's the one thing that does concern me with this sectional. Now, the thing with this sectional is this is not a great sectional. I would consider this to be a mediocre sectional this year. Blackford is in a rebuild this year, and really saying Blackford's in a rebuild is being very nice this year. They are definitely struggling this year. Madison Grant still going through their rebuilding seasons, and then Muncie Burrs has not been good in girls basketball in quite some time. And then Eastbrook this year, new head coach in Alicia Griffin, although she was a varsity assistant coach in the past. The big thing for Eastbrook right now is they lost a lot from last season, so they are a much younger team this year. I would imagine Eastbrook will get better next year as younger players start coming into the school, and the players coming back for next year will be more experienced and then more developed. So this Eastbrook team definitely having a down season by their standards, but I think that was to be expected no matter who was the head coach at Eastbrook. Eastbrook as a program is doing just fine. Now, I will tell you this. The one team that could give Alexandria some trouble in this sectional is Wapahani, the Wapahani Raiders. So it's not just the boys team that's doing well at Wapahani. The girls team is doing quite well as well. And Wapahani, unlike Alexandria, who's averaging 62 points per game, Wapahani is more of a defense-first team. They're only giving up around 34 points per game. So this team really hinges on their defense, and that's the thing that makes Wapahani a force to be reckoned with. They finished 18-4 in the regular season, 8-1 in conference play. Their lone loss in conference play coming at the hands of, let me make sure here, they lost to Eastern Hancock by 7 points back on November 30th, and Eastern Hancock has won 19 games this year. So definitely not a bad loss for Wapahani as they come in with hoping to knock off the giant Alexandria Tigers in that sectional 40. But when you look at Wapahani, they are going to be a little bit more balanced, a little more team by committee than Alexandria is. Kimber Abshir is their leading scorer, the senior, averaging 12.7 points per game. Megan Luce, the junior, averaging 12.5 points per game. Emily Luce, the junior, I would imagine they're related somehow. She's averaging around 10 points per game as well. And then even going down to number 10 for Wapahani, the senior. And let's see here. That is Judy Dardo. She's averaging 9 points per game. So right there are 4 players that are capable of scoring at least 9 or more points in a ball game. And I think that makes Wapahani definitely a dangerous team in the section when you consider just how good their defense has been this year. Abshir is also averaging 11.3 rebounds per game. So again, kind of like with North Miami back to 1A, Wapahani has a player that can rebound the basketball and score at a double-double pace. That makes Wapahani definitely a threat in this sectional. Emily Luce has 6.4 assists per game, 4 steals per game. So Luce is not only a player that can get you some buckets, but she can actually make some plays beyond the scoring aspects of things on both ends of the floor. Abshire also recording 3.5 blocks per game. So in a situation where Jacqueline Hosier is doing everything for the Alexandria Tigers, Kimber Abshire would be a player that would be a one to keep an eye on to try to disrupt the play of Hosier inside if they were to meet. And we're assuming that these two teams do play for a championship on Saturday because, well, let's be honest, beyond Wapahani and Alexandria, your best team is Eastbrook. And Eastbrook is not the same team this year as they were last year. So this is a clear rebuild for them this year. So we're looking at a two-horse race for the sectional. It really will bow down to Alexandria or Wapahani. I can see this go either way. I know Mason and I talked about this last night. But I still feel like anytime you have a player like Jacqueline Hosier who can make a good team a great team in a state tournament, I think that's the type of player that really worries me. I mean, 26.5 points per game. And again, Alexandria doesn't play a bad schedule by any means. Now, granted, the CIC doesn't help Alexandria's case too much just because the CIC is down right now for the most part. But I would honestly give the edge to Alexandria just because of that offensive prowess of Hosier is just too much of a problem, I think. And unless Wapahani can keep her down below her season average, I think Alexandria has to feel good about their chances of winning the sectional. Now we shift over to 2A Sectional 38, hosted by Lewis Cass, the school out of Cass County who reached semi-state last year for the first time in program history. They went to Logansport in semi-state before falling in the semi-state semifinals. The Lewis Cass Kings, they are a school that relies very heavily on defense, and they're a team that I would say they are probably they probably run one of the best zone defenses in the state of Indiana. That's what made Lewis Cass a threat in the playoffs last year, was their ability to defend the arch, defending the glass at an extremely high rate. And the Kings, as a program, they average around 23.3 rebounds per game. A lot of that is due to the fact that they are also averaging 11.5 steals per game. So they're they're forcing turnovers, they're slowing down teams, and they're forcing them to essentially difficult situations. And slowing down the pace is something that Lewis Cass wants to do. Now, the thing with the Kings is they're going to have to be good on defense because the offensive prowess of the Kings is not particularly great. They only have one player that averages double figures, and that is Afton Griffin, averaging 12.3 points per game. Miley Sipe and Anna Hedrick both average around 8 points per game, but the offense does dry up after those three players. Lewis Cass is not known for being an offensive team. They are not known for having the best of shooting numbers. They did lose some players from last season as well, so they are a little bit younger this year as well. That's one of the things that does worry me going into the state tournament for them is I don't know if they can make a deep run with a team that does play some freshmen and sophomores that maybe have never played at this level of basketball before. They shoot 28% from three, which is fine. It's not bad. They have two girls. Sipe and Griffin can shoot the three pretty well. They take a lot of threes, so you expect those two to have the ball in their hands from the three-point arc. But this is a team that struggles to score inside, right around 42%, which for a team that doesn't rely so much on shooting the basketball, you really need to be able to score inside a little bit. And 42%, I would consider that to be mediocre for a team that really doesn't shoot the ball all that great. So that's one thing that does give me a little bit of concern. And this is a team that has to take care of the basketball. This is a team that generally averages only 12.9 turnovers per game. So they're going to have to make sure they're taking care of the basketball in this state tournament. They do draw Eastern Greentown in the first round of the sectional. That is a one-win team. Very unlikely we're going to see an upset there from Eastern Greentown, I would imagine. But the bottom half of the bracket, and then you have Manchester, I should say. I want to make sure I want to mention this real quick. But the Manchester Squires, while they are no longer a team led by Brooklyn Buzzard, we'll talk about her in a moment, they still have a pretty good player on this Manchester team in Emma Walker, who's averaging 12.6 points per game, shooting 42% from the floor, 6.9 rebounds, 2.8 steals, 0.4 blocks, 77% from the free throw line, 35% from three. Though all those numbers lead the team in those respective categories. Emma Walker is a bucket for the Squires. So she does most of what Manchester wants to do. Now, Peyton Ream is a solid player as a senior on this team, averaging 9.4 points per game. She's got 3.4 rebounds, 2.2 steals. This is a team that's going to have to be able to get after defensively, 11.8 steals per game, and they're going to have to be able to rebound well. They do average 27 rebounds per game, so on the glass, they do have an edge against a team like Lewis Cass. That could be something to keep an eye on. The other thing they'll have to be careful though, they do commit 16 turnovers per game, so that's another issue as well. But I think, in addition to that, this is a team that really is a top-heavy offense. They only have two players that are capable of scoring at a decent rate, which is Walker and Ream. The others only average 5 points or fewer. That's a big concern for a team that really relies heavily on Emma Walker, and they are a team that they do take quite a few threes. We're talking 383 three-point attempts. They are shooting 25% from three. So this is a team that really struggles. They can go on to cold spells shooting the basketball. They only shoot 36% from two, which is below average in the state of Indiana. So they are going to have to be able to knock down some shots, and they're going to have to play some good defense if the Squires want to pull off an upset against Lewis Cass. But I think the bottom half of the bracket, I think, is where things get much more interesting. Oak Hill and Wabash is the second of a doubleheader tomorrow night, which is Tuesday. Oak Hill is 20-2 on the season, 6-1 in the Central Indiana Conference. Their lone loss in the conference coming in the hands of Alexandria. Liz Godfrey is averaging 10.2 points per game. Lydia Tretzler leads the team in rebounds at 5.3 rebounds. Laundry Hardman averages 5 assists per game, as well as 3.7 steals to lead the team in those two categories. The thing with Oak Hill is they are very much defense team. It's all about defense. It's all about defense. It's all about defense. Oak Hill is one of those teams where if the defense doesn't show up, they're not a team that has a capable game-changing player. They just do not have that player on this team as we speak. They are also a very young team. They're playing a lot of sophomores on this team, and they're not proven players in the playoffs right now in terms of their individual capabilities on the offensive side, other than Hardman. Hardman's probably the only one that maybe could do something in the tournaments, but Godfrey is their lone senior on this team, actually one of two seniors on this team, I should say. Godfrey averaging 10 points per game, 2 steals per game, but this is a team that really is going to need Godfrey to lead the team, as well as another senior by the name of Alexa Myers. Those two seniors are going to have a good contribution to seniors, because this Oak Hill team is incredibly young, and they're one of those teams where, again, if the defense doesn't show up, the offense has shown to not always be reliable. Now, they are 44% shooting team, so they are decent shooting the basketball. A lot of that is due in part to their three-point shooting. They are a 33% three-point shooting team, so they are quite good shooting the three ball, and they are 50% from two. So the numbers for Oak Hill are pretty good in terms of the shooting metrics. They want to be selective in their shots because of the fact that Oak Hill is a team that wants to be able to run the clock, play some good defense. But the big thing for Oak Hill is they're going to have to be able to contain the star power of Brooklyn Buzzard and Caitlin Honeycutt for Wabash. They are two players that are relied very heavily for Wabash, although Anna Daughtry can also contribute at 10.4 points per game. But when it comes to the Wabash Apaches, and we've talked about this in the past when Brooklyn Buzzard was at Manchester, Buzzard really is the magician of this team. She is the one that really gets things moving for this Wabash team. 15 points per game, that's a career high for her. She's scoring over 1,200 points in her career, combining at Manchester and Wabash. Having her best season shooting the basketball from the floor and from three. She's shooting 78% from the foul line, which is by far her best number. Averaging 4 rebounds, 2.6 assists, 2.6 steals. Her and Caitlin Honeycutt are just a perfect combination for the Wabash Apaches. Those two have to be really good in this sectional for Wabash to stay in this tournament hunt. Caitlin Honeycutt is having a monster senior year, career high of 33% from three. She's averaging 13 points per game on 45% shooting. She is shooting 64% from the foul line. That's a little bit of a concern there, but 5.7 rebounds, 3.4 assists to lead the Apaches, 3.3 steals per game. Daltrey is averaging 4.2 steals on top of her 10 points, and she's shooting 36% from the three-point line. So those three players for Wabash, in addition to potentially a Riley Boggs who can come in and add you some points as well, those four players are going to have to perform well this week for the Wabash Apaches to have a shot of a sectional championship, which I do think Wabash has a very manageable chance of doing so. But even if they get past Oak Hill, there's no guarantee they play on Saturday because Rochester has the bye. They await the winner of that particular matchup. The Zebras of Rochester, 16-6 on the season, 6-3 in the Three Rivers Conference. They're a little bit more like Oak Hill. They are a team that wants to be able to defend the basketball. They want the defense to be a big part of their offense. They're averaging 24 rebounds per game. They only score 40 points per game. So they're a team that has to be able to defend well. They have to be able to rebound the glass. They have to be able to limit the opponent's offensive potential because of the fact the Zebras just do not have a lot of offensive playmakers, although they are decently balanced with three players averaging 9 or more points, and Aubrey Wilson, Riley Clevenger, and Ella McCarter. If the Zebras can run their zone defense well, hold teams in check, play good defense, rebound the ball, I think the Zebras are a potential sleeper in the sectional, but I do worry about a potential nightmare situation where if they were to play Wabash in the second round, I am a little bit concerned about their ability to defend both Honeycutt and Buzzard. And that would be a big concern for me on paper. In the regular season, they actually lost to Wabash in the regular season 52-43, to which Buzzard, Daltrey, and Boggs combined for 44 of their 52 points. 12 points for Boggs, 14 for Buzzard, 18 points for Daltrey. And so that is going to be a concern for Rochester, is how do you defend a Buzzard? How do you keep her from utilizing her magician-like skills and her finesse play? How do you keep Honeycutt away from the basket or away from her spot in the corner? And then for Daltrey, you're going to have to block out the three-point shooting because Wabash is one of those teams that can hit their shots from downtown. So I think the final verdict for me for this sectional is I do like a Lewis Cash potentially playing for a sectional championship. I think that zone defense is a nightmarish situation for the Manchester Squires. But I think the bottom half of the bracket is more of a toss-up. I'm leaning more towards Oak Hill. I think they're the better defensive team of the three. I just think the Golden Eagles are a little bit more fundamentally sound than maybe a Wabash or a Rochester. So in the end, I would look at an Oak Hill Lewis Cass situation, and I would probably lean towards Oak Hill to win the sectional. We now look at more of our area sectionals. So 2A36 is our first 2A36 is our first ADC area sectional in Class 2A, where it's Adams Central, Bishop Lures, Bluffton, South Adams, Whitco, and Woodland. I can tell you already, Adams Central and South Adams, almost 0% chance they win a playoff game this year. Adams Central drew Bishop Lures in the first round, and I know Bishop Lures is like 8-14 this year. They are definitely not the Bishop Lures of the past this year. They are down by their standards, but I think all you got to see is Reese Roadhamel, and I say Bishop Lures is probably the favorite against Adams Central. I mean, sure, if the Jets get hot from three, maybe there's a chance Adams Central can hang around for a half. But I think it's very unlikely we see the Jets pulling off an upset over Bishop Lures. And even if AC were to be Bishop Lures, the size of Bluffton, the athleticism of Bluffton is just far too much of an issue for me. South Adams is in a much worse situation right now than Adams Central. They are honestly more of a young team per se than Adams Central. They are definitely young. They are in a clear rebuild. They've had some adversity this year. Definitely a young team. They're kind of limping into the playoffs right now for South Adams, and I just think that's all. I mean, to me, it's just adding more salt to the wound at this point. For a South Adams team that's clearly in a rebuild, this is not their year. regardless who they play, they're not going to win a playoff game. It's just not likely at all. So then you turn your attention to Whitcoe and Woodland in the top half of the bracket. That is probably the best game of the tournament thus far. Because when you look at this matchup, Whitcoe, with their fast tempo offense, they want to be able to play at a level of an AAU style offense. That's not to say they are an AAU ball club per se, but they do play at a tempo that it fits more in line to that type of offense. This is a team that takes about 30, 40 threes a game. They average around 9 threes a game. This is a team that wants to grab offensive boards, although they are small in height per se compared to a team like Woodland, but they are a team that can get you around 8 or 9 offensive boards if they are able to. The problem with Whitcoe is they have struggled against teams that have traditional heights and are able to take away what Whitcoe's good at and be able to utilize that length to frustrate their shot selection. This is where Woodland becomes a problem with their zone defense. They are physical, they are tough, they have some height, and I think the big issue for me that puts Woodland over the top is Alyssa Anderson. She's averaging 16.9 points per game. She's averaging around 11 rebounds a game. She's usually getting 2 or 3 blocks a game as well. Anderson is a matchup problem for anybody, and I would call Alyssa Anderson a walking cheat code for the Woodland Warriors. She is a problem, and if you don't solve Alyssa Anderson, I think Whitcoe is in major trouble because they don't have a post player that can match what Alyssa Anderson can do inside. And I think it prevents Whitcoe from being able to play at their normal rate of pace. I think the game against Northfield really is a foreshadowing of what could happen if Whitcoe doesn't make their shots. Whitcoe is very reliant on their three-point shooting. And they're really good at it. Let's not make it like they're not good at three-point shooting. They're really good at shooting the three ball. They shoot right around 32% from three because they have a lot of players that can make shots at a pretty high rate. I mean, let's take a look at it. Yeah, they're shooting 28% from three. A lot of it is because they're taking 574 three-point attempts. So they're taking a lot of threes. But they make 163. So they're a team that can make shots. And the three players that are usually the ones that make the most baskets, Reese Stonebreaker, Adriana Phillips, Jema Stonebreaker. Those are the three that really get things moving for this Whitcoe team, right? Reese Stonebreaker is averaging 14.7 points per game, the junior. She also has 6 rebounds, 3.1 assists, 2.9 steals per game. Reese Stonebreaker is a gamer in just as much as Jema Stonebreaker is a gamer, 12 points. 4.3 rebounds, 3.6 assists, 4 steals for Jema Stonebreaker. And then Phillips, who is committed to Principia College at the next level, 13.3 points, 3.9 rebounds, 1.7 assists, 1.4 steals is Adriana Phillips. Now, Phillips has cooled down lately for the Whitcoe Wildcats. She was averaging 16 points for most of the season, but she has cooled off as of late. I think the X factor for me is Adriana Phillips has to be Adriana Phillips. She's got to be able to make her threes, right? She is a player that traditionally shoots 33% from downtown. Reese Stonebreaker, 35% from three. Jema, 38% from three. Those three players have to be able to knock down their shots. And usually when they take their threes, they're a team that can make shots way, way back. We're talking volleyball line, low-to threes. So they can make their shots. So they're a team you cannot underestimate their potential. If Adriana Phillips makes her baskets, I think Whitcoe is a much more scarier team. But if she cools off like she's been lately, I think Woodland has to feel really good about their chances. Now, if there's one X factor that I think could be one that could sneak up in this matchup, I think Jocelyn Lukey is a player that could become an intriguing player for Whitcoe. She's a player that can hit some shots. She usually can get around 7 points. So she's an underrated player for this Whitcoe team, and she plays some pretty solid defense. So if you need someone that can defend and be able to contribute for this Whitcoe team, I think Lukey's a player to keep an eye on for the Wildcats. But I think, obviously, the big thing is Alyssa Anderson. Can they contain Anderson in the post? I think is a big question mark for me. I think the other thing you have to worry about if you're Woodland is, not Woodland, but if you're Whitcoe, is the way they want to play basketball. I think it can be a detriment when you're playing a team like Woodland that they can hold the fort, if you would, on the glass and to contain your shooters, right? They also have Brooke Knibler, 11.3 points per game, 4.5 assists. Now, Woodland is not a fantastic shooting team. They are shooting 37% from the floor. And then from three, they are shooting around 29%. Now, they are shooting three ball better than Whitco, but it's only because they're taking 114 fewer threes. That's the only reason why. But they do take a lot of threes as well. They can make shots. And the two players that typically make, actually, there are three players that can make their shots the most consistently are Reagan Weidenhofer, Brooke Knibler, and then McKenna Gobble. All shoot around 27 to 30% from three. Those are the three players I look at and say, yeah, you want to make sure you're being really careful about leaving those three players open, right? Another one that could potentially sneak up in this matchup is Emma McDaniel. She's shooting 32% from three. And so while she don't take a lot of threes, she is a kid that if she does get those opportunities, she is capable of knocking down shots. Woodland, I think, might have a little more all-around depth than Whitco does. And that would be the one thing that would worry me a little bit is in addition to their size inside, Woodland is pretty scrappy. They're very tough defensively. They can run a really good zone, so they can slow down Whitco's pace because Whitco does not want to play that style at all. I know them. They do not want to play that style. But I think the one thing you have to be careful of if you're Woodland is selling shots. You don't want to be selling shots against Whitco because Whitco's really good in transition. And then I think the big thing is the turnovers. They are a little bit suspect to turnovers. 15.9 turnovers per game. So Woodland has to be really careful about their decision making and their ball handling against this Whitco team that is going to press. But I think when it's all said and done, Bluffton is a heavy favorite to win this sectional. I know they played Woodland twice already, so you do have to be a little bit concerned about a third meeting against the Woodland Warriors. They are probably the only team in the ACAC that has been able to contain what Bluffton's good at for more than 2 quarters. But I think when it's all said and done, I think Bluffton is just far too much of a threat in this sectional. They're a senior-heavy team, around 5 seniors. They average 72 points per game. They're one of the top offenses in the state. They average 35 rebounds per game. And generally speaking, for this Bluffton team, this is a team that can get 16, 17, 18, 20 offensive rebounds because they're so big, they're so athletic, and they're an extremely tough team in the post. They're very difficult to box out. They're one of the hardest teams to defend inside. They are also extremely selfless. 17.4 assists per game. You got 7 or 8 players that are capable of making baskets at any given point. This is a team that averages 14 steals per game. So not only are really good offensively, but in Doug Curtis fashion, they're really good defensively as well. 4.5 blocks per game. Maren Schreiber is a key part of that inside, as well as Sophie Eisenhut, the sophomore. Those two are a vital part to their interior defense, as well as Conley Alt, who averages 3 steals per game to lead the Bluffton Tigers. Isabel Stout is a 1,000-point scorer for this team. She's averaging 20.7 points per game, but she can rebound a little bit. She's a 3-level scorer at this point of her career, and she is one of the most improved players in Northeast Indiana. There's no question about that. Chloe Dick off the bench can also make some shots as well. So when you look at this Bluffton team, they're shooting 50% from the floor, which is excellent. Actually 46%, but still very good. From three-point range, they are 34% from three. They are excellent in terms of three-point shooting efficiency. They don't take as many threes as Woodland and Whitco, which is a huge part of why the Bluffton Tigers are successful, because they are very balanced. They can score in the three, they can score in the high post, they can score inside, they can score in the foul line. They have a very balanced offense. There's not one thing that keeps Bluffton from being able to utilize their most successful areas on the court. So because of that, Bluffton is very good at shooting the 3 ball, and Isabel Stout is a 38% three-point shooter. So she is incredibly dangerous from 3, especially from the wing side. Sonneson is shooting 41% from 3, and she's a kid that when she gets on, this team is a nightmare, because Sonneson not only hits the 3 at a high rate, but she can also play some really good defense because she's got the height of being able to rebound and be able to be that presence on the glass, if you would. Renner can shoot 38% from 3. She don't take a lot of shots, but she can make some shots herself. Conley Alt is very selective on her threes, but when she does take her threes, she's almost automatic. So this is a very dangerous team, and I just don't see anybody that can really stop this Bluffton team. Even Bishop Luers this year, for as rich of a history as Bishop Luers does, they are very suspect on the glass. They struggle to have consistency for 4 quarters, and I just don't know if Bishop Lewis has the size anymore this year that can defend the post of Bluffton, and I think that really exposes Lewis' defense. I think the only team that could really maybe give Bluffton some trouble potentially could be Woodland, potentially could be a problem in the glass per se, especially if Bluffton goes on a cold streak shooting the basketball, and because Woodland has already seen them twice already. So that could be one potential concern, but I think Bluffton is a heavy favorite to win their sectional championship and repeat their success of this season. Let's shift over to 2A Sectional 35, hosted by Central Noble, and last season this was held at Eastside, with Fremont winning that sectional championship. Meanwhile, this year, this is going back to Central Noble, as the narrative and the storyline behind this sectional is Eastside looking to avenge last year's defeat to the Central Noble Cougars in the first round of sectionals. It's very apparent, if you saw my interview with Lake Crusher at ADC Sports, you probably know by now that they took that loss to heart. And it's understandable. Like, you had a team capable of making a deep playoff run, and you saw that goal, that dream, that potential kind of go by the wayside because of one game, and that's all it takes for a sectional to be decided. Just one game. Eastside didn't play their best game that night, and you saw the outcome of that sectional. Now this year, no Fremont this time around. They dropped to 1A sectional 52. And so now this is a sectional featuring Central Noble, Cherubusco, Eastside, Lakeland, Prairie Heights, and Westview. Now this sectional is going to be shorter than the other ones because on paper, when you look at this sectional, really Eastside is a major favorite this time around to win this sectional. I think last year they were favorites, but I think there was still like a possibility of an upset. I think this year, the way in which Central Noble has performed this year, Westview is decent, but I don't know if they're necessarily like great. And then Busco is in a rebuild. Prairie Heights is in a rebuild. Lakeland is kind of sort of still in a rebuild. Eastside is a clear front runner of winning this sectional. The Blazers have 6 or 7 girls that can contribute on any given moment. Lily Kresher averaging 15 points per game. Lucy Kitchen gets you around 8 points per game. Paige Tratzler and Sydney Kessler, they get you around 11 points per game, right? And that's just the offense alone. Rylan Moffler can get you some tough buckets inside and defend. Adelaide Eldon, she showed some moments of being able to perform in select games. And just like Evan Eldon showed some moments on the boys' side for the winless Eastside Blazers, Adelaide Eldon, for a 23-1 Eastside team, has showed some moments of being a pretty solid player off the bench for this Eastside team. So the Blazers are a very good basketball team, ranked 4th in Class 2A last night I checked. And this is a team that can make a deep playoff run, something we have not seen from this program in nearly 50 years. I mean, we're talking 1979 since the last time Eastside made it past regionals in girls basketball. This is a team that shoots 35% from 3 amongst 4 or 5 players, and opposing teams are committing 24, 25 turnovers per game. And the big thing with Eastside is the majority of their offense is from transition scoring. So if you're a team like a Central Noble that struggles to take care of the basketball, if you're a team like Westview that sometimes has trouble with their ball handling against teams with high pressure, if you're a team like Cherubusco that struggles with ball handling, or Lakeland that has trouble finding other reliable players that can play alongside Dulce Canito and Zoe Bowman, this is not an ideal matchup at all, playing the Eastside Blazers. And also, with the way which they can run their defense, and they have a variety of different ways they can run their defense, depending on how they see fit for that matchup. They might run zone. They might run man. They might run different matchups and combinations that suit them best. Now, you think to yourself, why in the world would you do that when you're a team that's won 23 games this year? Well, you know what? Clearly the coach has confidence in his defense, or he wouldn't be doing this. Like, you would never, ever switch that much on defense for any other team. But clearly he trusts his team so much that he can do that. Now, the big thing with Eastside is going to have to be, number one, they can't settle for shots. I think that's the big thing for Eastside is you can't settle for shots. Number two, you got to take care of the basketball yourself. You can't commit turnovers. You can't get lazy with the passing, right? And then thirdly, I think the big thing is stay out of silly fouls. Don't get into foul trouble because you're not making the best decisions with your fouls. Okay? And so I think that's the way you look at the East Side, but they're heavy favorites. And I think when you look at the section as a whole, I think Westview, I'm curious to see how they can build off of the late season success, including the win over the win over Fairfield, I should say. That game right there could be a confidence booster for Westview to not only get to the championship game, but also to build for next season. Now, keep in mind with Westview, they do have a feeder system of young talent coming through. And I'm seeing the scores of the middle school games for Westview, and they're just completely crushing their conference opponents right now. I know Coach Yoder has a daughter that's playing middle school ball at Westview. And I can tell you right now, if I'm a Westview fan, I'm pretty excited about where the program's heading. I know last year did not go the way that things wanted to for the program, but it was very clear that the program was much more realistic about their chances than the media was. I think we thought they might take the step up last year, but I think they knew right away that they were not ready. And the good thing for this program is they could have easily derailed from that season, and yet they still trust the process, and now they're better. They're a much better team this year. They're right at 500. They're going to be right there to at least play for Saturday night, and they're going to compete. And I think that's the thing you got to like if you're Coach Yoder is you didn't let last season become the defining moment of this program. And now you got a future in place for this program to be better in the coming years ahead. I like where Westview's heading. I like the way they utilize their size with Bree Corey. I like the way they utilize their backcourt with Karis Weinberg, and you have Janissa Lehman on this team. J.J. Whetstone off the bench gives you some tough minutes on this Westview team. Olivia Bontrager is becoming a much more confident ball handler as the floor general of this team. I like the way it's built, and I think the future of Westview is very bright. Now, Prairie Heights should not be overlooked for Westview. I like the toughness of Prairie Heights. I think they play extremely hard. They're a well-coached team. They never, ever give up. I think that's one of the things I like about Prairie Heights is they never, ever show any signs of defeat. They always play hard. They always have a good energy about them. And I think that's a sign of a good culture, is when you have a team that believes in each other and they believe they can win no matter what their record is or what their season is, they're still playing hard. That's the thing I love about this culture with Prairie Heights. This is not like it was in the past, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, back in 2017, where it was a losing culture at Prairie Heights. There was no hope for the future of this program. But now that you see the way this team's being coached, the way the development of this program is, I think you have to like the fact that Prairie Heights is still competing, even with the losses, even with the struggles, even with the injuries, even with the youth of this team. This program is still moving in the right direction. And even with the graduation of Emily McRae at the end of this season, you got to believe like Prairie Heights is still building something for the next 4 or 5 years, where Prairie Heights is a competitive team again in girls basketball. Because of what Coach Moore has done with this program, I think you have to like where Prairie Heights is at. Lakeland. I think Lakeland has shown some moments of good things. The thing with Lakeland is they got to put 4 quarters together. That's the thing with Lakeland right now that I want to see them improve in the future is development of the players around Bowman and Cornito. They need to be able to become a more confident shooting team. They need to be a more defensively structured team. I think that's still an issue for Lakeland. And I think the bigger thing for the Lakers is be able to simply build upon this season. They're a more mature team, but they can be a better team. That's the thing I look at with Lakeland. And then Central Noble, obviously, I think this year is more of a learning season for the offense, I think, compared to past years, because I think they're kind of in this transition phase of some younger players coming in. I know they're going to bring back most of the team next year, but there is kind of a transition phase with this team right now because you got some core of players coming up. And Jaylee Sloan is going to be that big name next year for Central Noble, or at the very least in 2 years. She's going to be a main focal point of this team. Abby Pleat, I think has done a decent job, but I think Abby Pleat can be much better next year. Grace Swink is a really good center, but I don't think the offense, as in terms of the individual players, I don't think they do enough to utilize what Grace Swank can do. And to me, this is more about the players learning how to mature, learning how to become a more universally balanced team so they're not so reliant on taking a bunch of threes and they can actually get to the basket, get to the free throw line, and make some shots that way. There's nothing wrong about being a three-point shooting team, but you got to be able to have good ball movement and be able to attack the paint. Central Noble really struggles with that right now. And I think this is why I said this is a learning year for the team. I like the way the coaching staff has planned this program. I like the way they utilize their JV as a development of the program. I think they're moving in the right direction, but I think the individual players are in this learning curve season for the program. I think they need to be able to learn off of this year. They need to be more aggressive next year. That's something I want to see Central Noble get better at. Because part of the reason why they're struggling with Eastside and struggling with teams like Woodland that are more physical teams, East Noble is another example of this. They're struggling to be able to get to the basket and be able to utilize their speed and what they can do with the basketball to draw fouls, to put more pressure on the interior defense. They're struggling to get to the inside, to the interior, and get to the paint. Central Noble has been a little bit more reliant on the threes this year, which is not a bad thing if you make your shots, but some teams are just going to just give you nothing from the three. And I think that's where Central Noble struggle. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's part of the reason why I think Eastside is a heavy favorite here. I think this is a year where Eastside's kind of playing so well. They're playing much more determined basketball. They don't seem to be as complacent this year, which is a good thing for this program. But I think ultimately, Eastside to me is a heavy favorite.